Hello friends, and welcome back to another video. I feel like my hair is really red today. I don't know why. There's a lot going on up here, but I thought in today's video it would be fun to revisit something that I posted at the very start of this year. January 25th of this year, I posted a video titled, I need to read these books in 2023. And it was my general 2023 TBR. I picked, I believe, 12 books that I said I needed to read before the end of the year. Either because they were calling to me or because they had been sitting for so long that I knew I needed to get to them. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to rewatch this video now and see, did I actually read those books? Was it worth it to read those books? Or was it not really something that I ended up caring about? So we're gonna be jumping back and forth between me then and me now, and we'll talk about some books. These are probably the ones that I'm absolutely the most excited about. Cast by Isabel Wilkerson is a book that I've had for, I don't even know how long. I keep saying I'm gonna read it and then I put it off. I think just because it's nonfiction, it's very intimidating. I need to just force myself to sit down and get into it, and I think once I start, it really won't be so bad. Cast by Isabel Wilkerson is something that was on my physical TBR for well over a year, and I was trying to get through it for maybe 6 months of this year, where I was reading a couple pages at a time. I would set it down. I feel like I should be holding up these books while I talk about them, but my bookshelf on some shelves is currently 3 layers deep, so I really don't want to go digging right now. I did end up finishing Cast. It took forever. Not even because the writing was hard to get through or hard to understand or anything like that, just because I was so intimidated, because I felt like I had to take in all the information, so if I wasn't reading it correctly, then I couldn't read it at all. Which is not how books work, especially when it's a book that you own and you can just read again if you need to. Like, if I wanted to reference this information, I could just look at it again. I don't have to become a professional after reading one single book, but I finished it on August 29th. I didn't give it a rating just because I try to avoid rating nonfiction because it's a lot more about the information than the actual story. I like to rate the way that a story is paced or the characters are developed, and that's not really something that you can judge in nonfiction, so I am very satisfied that I read this book because I feel like every year I have one book that sticks with me for a majority of the year. A couple of years ago, it was a book by Jules Verne. Last year, it was The Vampire Chronicles, and this year I really do think it was Cast, so it was very satisfying in my heart to have it finished. I'm very happy that out of all of these books, I did complete that one. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, which is actually my first ever book of the month box. I decided to treat myself for the new year and start doing that, so this is the first one I picked just because I've heard so many things about it and I want to know what all the hype's about. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin is another victory. It's so cute seeing my early self talk about how it's my first month with book of the month and now I've done all 12. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow I read in April, finished it April 18th, and I gave it 4.75, bordering on 5 stars. In this book, you're following a pair of friends. They meet in a hospital because they have some things that they're going through, but they bond over video games, and then you're following them later when they're in college and beyond, just living as adults, and they're in the video game industry working together, and you're following how their lives intersect, and it's pretty complicated, it's pretty messy just because friendships are complicated and messy, but I love how much it focuses on the way that video games bring them together, because I feel like it's hard to write about that type of thing without it feeling cringy or overdone. It kind of goes into the same territory as when people write about social media, where it's like, yeah, we're living through it, so how can you write it in a way that feels relevant when it's constantly changing, constantly evolving? But I do think this book does it in a way where it still feels relatable to people across generations. A lot of people have grown up with video games in their lives as a main part of their lives, and especially when I was growing up, for a lot of people my age, we connected solely through video games. So many of my friendships that I have now are entirely because we said, hey, do you want to play this game together? And then we just kept playing, and now 10-15 years later, we're still friends and we still connect over the same games. And I finished this book right before going to a birthday party where everybody came over and started talking about games, and these are people that I've never met before, but they immediately started playing games together and talking about video games, and it just felt so special to have read a book like this where you're watching characters and how much this hobby means to them, and then you go in real life and you see that it still holds up. This was one of the top books of last year, so it's no surprise that I liked it. On to the next. Convenience Store Woman I picked up fairly recently, but I so desperately want to read this. It's about a woman who works in a convenience store and people are saying that she's too old and she needs to actually go on with her life and actually do adult things. And she's content to just work where she is. And I feel like I can really relate to that right now, and I would really like to see a character who's feeling the same way. We're starting off really strong. We've got 3 for 3 because the third book was Convenience Store Woman, which I finished on January 26th, though right after I finished recording that video. In this book, you're following a woman who works at a convenience store and she's dealing with a lot of outside pressure from people saying, you have to get another job, you have to move on with your life, you have to start being an adult. But she's content where she is. I was really excited to read this because at the time I felt pretty stuck in my job because I'm currently going to college. Like, I am a student, but I'm also working as a barista, and I just felt like that job wasn't enough. I feel like I'm not contributing enough, and I have people around me saying, when are you gonna leave this job? Go somewhere else, do something bigger. And I just felt really trapped in either situation because I didn't want to leave, but I also wasn't feeling very supported with the choice that I had made. And I'm very happy that I did read this book because I ended up relating to a lot of the feelings of the main character of knowing the cycle of your job. Like, even when you're not at work, still following that same cycle of being like, oh, here's the time where the shift is changing over, and here's the time where this needs to go out and this needs to be happening. I'll be thinking about that every day, whether or not I'm in the job. So it was really validating to see a character that is having that same thought process. I gave it 4.25 stars, but I think it was exactly what I needed to read at the time because it so perfectly matched how I was feeling. Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. It's about Hamlet's son. I've seen a lot of people, I've seen Noelle Gallagher talk about it, Peruse Project said it made her cry. Lots of people have said a lot of good things about this. And honestly, for some reason, I thought that it was going to be way longer, but it's really not that bad, so I think I could get through it fairly quickly if I just started. The fourth book is another win. We have Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I finished this book on March 4th, and I gave it 4.5 stars, which honestly, it was rated that high purely because the writing is so beautiful. It's not a story that I even necessarily think about at all. It's not one that I remember or that I reflect on, but the way that it's written is just so gorgeous. The story follows the son of Hamlet, but it also follows his wife. And you're watching this family struggle because the dad is away at work, the mother is over a mile away and doesn't know what's happening, but in the household, Hamnet is dying. He's fallen ill, and he's not gonna survive the week. And you're watching him and his twin sister try to deal with this while both of their parents are away and unaware of the situation. But you also get to follow the whole life of their mother and how she met the person that she ended up marrying, and how deeply she loved and cared for the things around her, and how much she is filled with grief after everything that happens. That's ultimately what this book is. It's a story about grief, and you're watching specifically the mother and how she deals with that. I love that this book doesn't mention Shakespeare. Did I call him Hamlet? It's about Hamlet's son. The story follows the son of Hamlet. It doesn't mention him by name because the story isn't about him, and I think that's such a nice touch. The next couple are books that I have not gotten to yet, which is a little bit disappointing because I said I needed to read them, and here we are with 2 or 3 weeks left in the year. So I guess it's still possible, and I'll let you know at my final end of the year wrap-up, but as of right now, I haven't gotten to them. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I bought this when we went to New York in August, but it's one of those things where I have such high expectations that I don't want to read it and risk messing that up. But it's about the relationship between a son and a mother, and I don't know if I'm emotionally ready to handle that. The first one is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, which I just saw Jack Edwards talk about in a video where he said it's a must-buy author. And the fact that he spoke so highly of this author and this book makes me really disappointed that I haven't read it yet because I would love to feel that way. I do think it's because I'm scared that it's gonna be too sad, because the same thing with the next book, which is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. Both of those specifically talk about the relationship between a child and their mother and the complications that come along with that. For this book, talking about an exploration of race, class, and masculinity, feeling like you don't fit in or like you're not being heard. And they're both just so intimidating because relationships are hard to manage, and I just don't know if I'm ready to read those. And with this book, it's kind of the same thing I was saying about Normal People, where I've been putting it off for so long because I want to be the type of person who likes this book, but I don't want to risk that title by actually reading it and then not liking it. So I'm just in this perpetual state of author enthusiast, even though I haven't read any of their books. It would be really great to change that by the end of the year if I actually manage to get through that book before 2023 is over, because then that gives me an excuse to buy his other works. But I just cannot bring myself to read it. I don't think I can emotionally handle this right now. Same thing with this one. These two very much go together with that. I just feel like I can't handle what's in them right now, but I really want to read them. But I think there's nothing wrong with that. If you have a book and you're excited to read it, but you don't think you can handle the content that's in it right then, there's nothing wrong with waiting. I totally did not realize that I compared the two of them in this video as well, so I guess my feelings have not changed at all. I also have been meaning to get to Pachinko. I wanted to read this last year. I didn't get around to it because I was too intimidated to say the name, but now I finally am saying it, and I just need to force myself to read it. You're following a family over generations. You're following their journey as immigrants, which it can be really hard to do this type of book good because you have to really establish the characters. You have to really be able to set up that family tree so it doesn't get too confusing with too many different names. And I've heard that this book does that part fairly well, but that the ending falls a little flat, so I want to start reading this. I just don't know how much I'll like it, and that's putting me off. I don't even want to talk about Pachinko by Min Jin Lee because I have been putting off that book for way too long, all because I was too intimidated to say the title, and then apparently I've been saying it for a year and I still never picked it up, so what's the excuse this time? I hyped it up in my head so much that now I feel like I can never pick it up, but I don't even know the reason anymore. Why can't I talk about that book? Why can't I read that book? There's no excuse for this one. It just stresses me out. This is a gift from Kaylin. We only recently got this. It is The Invention of Hugo Cabret, and it looks large and it looks intimidating, but it is a lot of pictures. They said that this was one of their favorite stories, so got it to share. The Invention of Hugo Cabret I did end up reading. I finished it on January 24th, so again, right after filming this video, and I gave it 4.25 stars, but I did like it enough to get his other book and read that, The Marvels. I read that a couple months later, so I did think about this author past reading the book, which is a good sign. Like I said in that video, it is a lot of pictures, so it's very easy to get through. It very much feels like you're watching a movie of these characters rather than dragging yourself through a book that's that long. But in this book, you're following an orphan who is also the clock keeper at this train station. He's being a little bit secretive. He's not really supposed to be up there, but somebody eventually finds out about him, and you're following that complication where his undercover life is being revealed. But he's also discovering more about himself because he used to live here with his father, who has since passed away, and he's finding the secrets that come along with that guy as well. What an insightful summary. He's finding out the secrets of that guy. I think this author is really, really good at telling stories. Even when they are a little bit sad, it's still presented in a way where you can consume it without feeling so terrible after. I have Agatha Christie short stories, which I was planning to read in the next month or two. Agatha Christie short stories. I said I was gonna read within the next month or two. In my head, I thought that I could read that book starting in February, because in January I was reading all of Harry Potter, and I thought maybe February can be strictly dedicated to this book, where I'll split it up over the month and then get through the whole thing. Harry Potter ended up going over into February, and then obviously that knocked off the whole plan, and now we're in December. I did try reading it in October for a little bit. I read for maybe the 1st and the 2nd of October, and I never picked it up after that, and I haven't touched it since then. Because in my head, I wanted to read the entire book within 1 month so that I could put it on my story graph as being a part of that month, so that the graph could accurately reflect how many pages I had read during that month, which is kind of a silly thing to base things off of. But I didn't want to start a book mid-October and then finish it mid-November and then all the pages count towards November, even though maybe a majority if it was read in October. Which also, it's not the type of book that you sit down and read all in one sitting. That's the type of thing, because it's a collection of short stories where you can read it over the period of however long. No Longer Human, I read Junji Ito's version, but I would like to read it in its actual form. But I was watching Emmy Rank Classics, and she put it at like a 3 or something, because the concept is cool, but I guess the execution just wasn't all that touching. No Longer Human I just talked about in my December TBR, so clearly I have not read it yet. I did start it a couple of times. I did keep trying throughout the year, but I got intimidated by the language, I think, because I started reading it, I saw some words that I didn't know, and I thought maybe it would be fun to annotate it like I did with Cast, where if I didn't know a word, I would underline it, I would go through it, I would define it for myself. And I think because I was taking a more academic approach to reading it, it just completely put me off. But it's so short, and most of the pages are empty. Like, the actual words on the page don't cover that much, so I know I could read it within like a day or two. Especially because I've wanted to read all these books for an entire year. The ones that are left have so much anticipation behind them, I feel like I can't pick them up anymore. It is truly the worst feeling. That's why you shouldn't stock up on a physical TBR so much, because then it feels like some books are completely unapproachable just because they've been with you for so long. It's like in my head, these books exist as the unread books, so I don't dare pick them up and read them because that would change my whole dynamic with them, and I don't want to risk that. Lolita and My Dark Vanessa. I actually wanted to do a video kind of comparing these two because they're both about like an age gap, power dynamic, bad relationship between maybe a student and a teacher. They're both about the power dynamic of an older man and a younger teenager girl who's not somebody that should be in a relationship with this guy, and I'm fairly sure Lolita's from the guy's perspective and My Dark Vanessa's from the girl. So I would like to read both of these for a video and kind of compare the perspectives and the dynamics of the characters and all of that. As a pair, I had My Dark Vanessa and Lolita, which I wanted to read together for a video so that I could compare them because they kind of have similar ideas but from opposite perspectives. I got less than 100 pages through Lolita, and then I gave up on the video idea entirely because I just wasn't drawn to it. And also, I think I started reading, I could be misremembering, but I think I started reading that right before June, which is when I tried to do daily videos, and then I didn't have any time to fit in reading and analyzing those two books. And then by the time I wanted to get back into it, I had completely forgotten what I already read, but I didn't want to restart, so I just gave up entirely. And I decided I'm probably not going to do that video comparing it after all, because at this point, again, because I've hyped it up so much in my head, I feel like I'm just never going to end up reading them, because I feel like I won't be able to analyze them in the way that I thought I could. And I think that covers all of them. So that means out of the 12 top picks that I had from my physical TBR, I read 5 of them, which is less than half, so not ideal. Do I think I could read a couple more before the year is out? Yes. I think just looking at the list, the ones that seemed the most possible, probably No Longer Human because of how short it is. My Dark Vanessa, as long as it's not paired with Lolita, could probably be a good pick. And then either I'm Glad My Mom Died or Unearthed or Briefly Gorgeous, probably not both, because I think both of those at once would be way too much. I could probably fit at least something in before the end of the year. And that's the end of this video. I think the biggest success is that I'm not feeling disappointed that I didn't read them, because those were my interests a year ago, right? Like 12 months ago. So maybe I just wasn't interested past then. A lot of time has passed. I've changed a lot as a person. So it's entirely possible that what interested me then isn't gonna interest me now. So it makes sense that I didn't get to all of them, because some of them just weren't calling for me anymore. And maybe the ones that I had been putting off, it's all for the best, because it just wasn't the right time for them, and that's totally fine, and I feel fine. It doesn't seem like it. It seems like I'm lying through my teeth, but I promise I am not affected by this. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I'm trying to post most days of December, not every day, because I simply cannot, but you can stick around for whenever I do end up posting. And if you want, you can also go support me on my main channel, Riverbxnd, where I post music content. I'm thinking I really want to put more focus into that channel starting next year, so you might see a little bit of a dip in this one, but hopefully it'll all go into effort over there. All my links are in the description. I'll see you in another video. Bye!